Hi, welcome to Hathersage Players Whodunnit, Murder at Hathersage Hall. I'm Keith Orange. Later, at this venue, we will be live unmasking a murderer. If you've not seen the news, where have you been? Simon Shuttleton got murdered in Hathersage Hall 7 days ago. We need you to help. Use that live chat to tell me your thoughts. They can't crash the internet, can they, Auntie? Auntie's my maid. She helps me out around the house, tucks me into bed, brings me cocoa, that kind of thing. I'll let you catch up with the news. Grab a pen and paper, and I'll be seeing you in 5 minutes.
Good evening and welcome to Look Anywhere But Yorkshire on Monday the 6th of July 2020. My name is Les Lynham. Tonight's headlines: Murder most foul in Happy Hathersage. A man's body is found at Hathersage Hall. Police continue their war on speeding motorists by adding speed bumps to the Bamford Strait. And later, Derbyshire Dales District Council considers creating a bylaw allowing people to shoot down drones as long as they pay for the damage afterwards. But back to our main story. Hathersage businessman Simon Shuttleton, 55 years old, was found dead on Saturday evening in his study at Hathersage Hall, the headquarters of Hathersage Hall Spring Water Company. Police were summoned by Dr. Brian Brown, foreman, who discovered the body at approximately 6:45 p.m. Mr. Shuttleton was found slumped in his chair with a substantial gunshot wound to the rear of his head. Police have revealed that the angle of the gunshot wound suggests that he was unaware of his assailant and did not anticipate being shot. A recently fired gun was found near the body. Mr. Shuttleton came to Hathersage 7 years ago and quickly established himself as a shrewd businessman. He bought Hathersage Hall, a substantial country house. Then, in partnership with local entrepreneurs Colonel Miles Mustard and Lady Gabriella Gold, he founded the highly successful Spring Water Company using the natural spring in his grounds. Mr. Shuttleton and Miss Winifred White, a Hathersage native, were to have been married next week. By marrying Mr. Shuttleton, Miss White would have nullified the spinster disqualification clause in her late father's will and become principal heir to the Hope Valley farm estate. The extensive farm, which borders the Hathersage Hall property, currently belongs to her mother, Mrs. Patricia Peacock. In only a few years, it will transfer to one of the children, either Miss White or Professor Phineas Plum, Miss White's younger brother and current heir. To date, there have been no arrests in this case. We'll take a break now, but more when we come back on the Bamford Strait speed bumps, when we'll be challenging our intrepid reporter to see if he can drive his car over them at 50 miles an hour. Good evening and welcome to Look Anywhere But Yorkshire on Wednesday the 8th of July 2020. My name is Les Lynham. Tonight's headlines: Murder most foul in Happy Hathersage, an arrest is made. We ask, 13 years after the Castleton bank robbery which left a woman and her young son dead, isn't it about time the killers were brought to justice? And later, questions are asked as to whether the ducks in the Hathersage duck race are guilty of taking performance-enhancing drugs. But back to our main story. As we reported on Monday, Hathersage businessman Simon Shuttleton, 55 years old, was found dead on Saturday in his study at Hathersage Hall, the headquarters of the Hathersage Hall Spring Water Company. In a remarkable twist of events yesterday, Dr. Brian Brown, the man who reported the murder to the police, walked into a quiet jeweller shop in Sheffield where he purchased a pair of pearl earrings with some blood-stained cash. The jeweller was suspicious and informed the police. Police have seized the cash and now confirmed that the blood found on the cash is Mr. Shuttleton's. The police promptly traced Dr. Brown and arrested him, but have refused to comment upon the forensic findings. He was interviewed by the police and then bailed pending further inquiries. The police have refused to reveal what he said in that interview. Local speculation grows as Mr. Shuttleton left no known heirs or formal will. Without a legally designated heir, a prior agreement gives full ownership of the Spring Water Company and its property to Colonel Miles Mustard and Lady Gabriella Gold. There's also been speculation that Miss Stella Scarlett, a local barmaid, may file a claim to Mr. Shuttleton's estate based on the long-term relationship she claims to have shared with him. We'll take a break now, but more when we come back on the sad events 13 years ago when robbers made off with thousands of pounds, knocking down and killing a mother and child. Good evening and welcome to Look Anywhere But Yorkshire on Friday the 10th of July 2020. My name is Les Lynham. Tonight's headlines: Murder most foul in Happy Hathersage, another arrest is made. The Derbyshire village of Hope is considering building a chairlift to the top of Wyn Hill in anticipation of climate change bringing colder winters and the chance of a ski resort. And the future of Hathersage Pram Race lies in the balance. District councillors suggest that the event is just too silly to feature in Gala. But back to our main story. Hathersage businessman Simon Shuttleton, 55 years old, was found dead on Saturday in his study at Hathersage Hall Spring Water Company. We understand that yesterday, police sniffer dogs walking the route from Hope Valley Farm to Hathersage Hall led officers to a piece of lead piping concealed at the old treehouse. The lead piping was found to carry not only traces of Mr. Shuttleton's blood, but also traces of strychnine. Strychnine is a highly toxic, colourless bitter poison used as a pesticide. It is so toxic that a few drops can be lethal to humans. Police have made no comment on whether there's any evidence of poisoning. A fingerprint examination of the lead piping has provided the police with a link to Professor Phineas Plum, who, by chance, has written many studies on the use of poisons. It is believed that police have also executed a search warrant at Hope Valley Farm where they recovered strychnine in containers. The police promptly traced Professor Plum and arrested him. He was interviewed by the police and then bailed pending further inquiries. The police have refused to reveal what he said in that interview. Local speculation grows as Professor Plum had recently requested the Vicar of Hathersage, the Reverend Gilbert Green, to investigate some legal matters relating to Mr. Shuttleton. The outcome of those investigations are as yet unknown. We'll take a break now, but more when we come back on the proposed chairlift to the ski resort at the top of Wyn Hill. A local veteran fell racer, Mr. Andrew Hartley, says it should make the Bamford Fell Race a bit easier.
Welcome back. So, Auntie and I are thinking of doing a weird mini adventure where we're going around looking at doors in Hathersage. It's called Famous Doors of Hathersage. We thought we'd make the first one easy for you. I can see that Professor Plum is trending quite heavily already on the live chat. Not surprising really, he's a bit of a strange character. Anyway, it's time to meet the suspects. Some of them are hot, and some of them are not. Some of them are weird, and some of them have a beard. Anyway, do you know, this is twinned with Hun in Myanmar. I'm going back in.
My name's Mustard, Colonel Miles Mustard. I'm no longer in the army now, although I had a very distinguished career. As you see, I have kept the uniform. I'm 56 years old and married to Lady Gabriella Gold. I'm the managing director of the Mustard Construction Company. My family have always been very successful in business. Indeed, some might regard them as well off. I myself was a business partner of Simon Shuttleton in the Hathersage Hall Spring Water Company.
Good evening. I'm Lady Gabriella Gold. I'm somewhere in my mid-40s, and from my humble beginnings in the Hope Valley, I've toiled tirelessly to forge relationships both in business and in high society. That's how I came to enchant my darling second husband, Colonel Miles Mustard. With my brains and his brawn, and we built the backbone of the Hope Valley business community, the Hathersage Hall Springwater Company, with our dear departed partner, Simon Shuttleton, of course. We like to play hard. I like to play. But I'm no wallflower, the chair of Hope Valley District Planning Executive and the president of the Health Commission. If you have a problem, if no one else can solve it, come have a whisper in my shell-like.
Hello, I am Patricia Peacock. I own and manage Hope Valley Farm. I've lived at the farm since I married my late husband, Percival, 35 years ago. Sadly, poor Percy was killed in a shooting accident. That's over 20 years ago now, and since then I've had to run things pretty much on my own. Actually, I'm pretty darn good at it too. Although being a farmer these days is not an easy ticket. I've got 2 children, both of them grown up, Phineas and Winifred. Neither of them has taken much interest in the farm until recently, when I think they probably realised that one of them would soon own it. I have honestly been rather worried about Winifred. She'd always been shy. But then suddenly she was bewitched by that shyster Simon Shuttleton. Phineas and I were concerned, so we asked Reverend Green to do a bit of digging about Shuttleton. Nothing came of it, but I'm sure Shuttleton was hiding something.
Hello, my name is Miss Winifred White. I am 37 years old. I am quite shy. Not many people have really taken much notice of me. I do have quite a bit of money, but only through my mother, Mrs. Patricia Peacock, being owner of Hope Valley Farm. I left Hathersage many years ago and went to Castleton to work. There I met the Reverend Gilbert Green in a solicitor's firm, and several years later I moved back to Hathersage, unmarried, where I met Simon Shuttleton, and we started a relationship, and one thing led to another, and we were engaged. My family were against the marriage.
Hello, I'm Phineas Plum, Professor Phineas Plum, 33 years old, unmarried. I grew up in Hathersage, always lived around the area. Fond memories of my life when I was growing up at Hope Valley Farm. Used to have a favourite tree house down at the end of the garden. Yeah, I'm quite a successful professional, made quite a name for myself, you know, making waves. My mother is Patricia Peacock. My elder sister is Winifred White, due to be married, but unfortunately, future husband is now the deceased, Simon Shuttleton. Can't say I had any love for the fellow. He was a bit of a shady character, if you ask me, but we have to be sensitive at this time for my sister's sake, if nothing else. And I think the most important thing, I think we can all agree, is that the perpetrator of this heinous crime must be brought to justice.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Gilbert Green. I'm 40 years old. I'm unmarried, and I'm the vicar of Hathersage, which is strange, really, because I'm standing in front of this height chart. I don't know why I'm here, really. I've been the vicar of Hathersage for some time and always try and help people in the village. Before that, I was a solicitor in Castleton for a few years. Very thorough, well thought of. Got to know Winifred White through that. And then after a while, I decided to retrain into the clergy, and that brought me back to Hathersage, where I live at the vicarage and take church services every Sunday. So clearly don't murder anybody. Always prepared, never see me without an umbrella, that sort of thing.
Hi, I'm Stella Scarlett. As for my age, well, a lady never tells. I work as a barmaid at the bunkhouse in Hathersage, which I really enjoy. You get to meet all kinds of interesting characters. And as for the tips, well, I make a killing. Until recently, I was in a relationship with Simon Shuttleton. That was until he started a relationship with Winifred White. So I guess the song is wrong. Money can buy you love. Anyway, I still have my looks, I still have my youth. One never knows what's round the corner.
Hello, I'm Dr. Brian Brown. I'm not a proper doctor. Well, I am actually, I've got a PhD. I haven't got a stethoscope or out like that. But anyway, I'm 47 years old, and that is my biggest life achievement, to be fair. The second biggest life achievement is that I'm unmarried. I think that's quite an exceptional situation, seeing that I'm such a catch I've managed to evade for all this time. Anyway, I'm plant foreman at Hathersage All Spring Water Company, and to be fair, I'm not particularly well off, which means I've got absolutely in terms of cash. But I've known Shuttleton for some years, and he handpicked me for the job. I suspect he might be taking the mickey, to be fair. Anyway, I like a beer in the bunkhouse, and that's Stella Scarlett. I know I'm not worthy, but I do fancy her. Oh my God, I do.
How did I ever get roped into this? Now, you've heard the news and you've met the suspects. Why don't you take a 5-minute break whilst you discuss who you think did it? Put on the kettle, find a pen that works, or maybe even go to the loo. If you can, why don't you make an online donation to Hathersage Gala, who support local charities? I do a lot of charity work, although I don't like to talk about it. Welcome back. Famous Doors of Hathersage, number 2. You know this isn't like normal Cluedo, don't you? Because people keep asking on the live feed if they need to name a murderer, a weapon and a room. Well, I've already told you the room, so there's no prizes there, are there? Anyway, all the suspects are now gathering in the conservatory at Hathersage Hall. Reverend Green is trending now. He thinks he's a street vicar. But we need evidence against him. Let's go and listen in.
Oh, so we're all here in the conservatory, are we? Well, what on earth has been happening? Plum, you've been arrested. What have you been up to?
Well, now, yes, I was arrested. That is true. But it's merely a formality. I think it's just the police doing their job as they are entitled to do. No, really nothing to worry about there. I think the person that we really need to be focusing on is Brown, that drunkard Brown. He was also arrested, but he was actually arrested for something significant. I believe he was arrested with some bloodied money on him.
I don't think you're right there, mate. That was what we scientists call tomato ketchup. I'd gone to the new chip shop and I'd accidentally spilt some tomato ketchup on me cash when I came out. So you're absolutely wrong there.
Now, I mean, if that isn't evidence of drunken rambling, then I don't think I've ever heard. I think the facts of the matter are that you were arrested with a wad of cash on you and the deceased, Simon Shuttleton's, blood on that money. Not to mention the fact that I heard that you were thrown out of the bunkhouse for drunken behaviour.
Possibly.
Oh, for goodness sake, Phineas. What do you think he could possibly do if he was that drunk?
Mustard and gold. I think that you knew and Simon Shuttleton did not have any heirs. And that means, if I understand it right, that now that he's dead, you inherit the rest of the company.
Well, that might be true, but why on earth would we need to kill him?
I'd like to interject, if that's okay. And I agree with my darling husband, Miles. We own the company, with Simon admittedly, but we have no reason to kill him. He's part of our business. He's an integral part of our business, and he'll be sorely missed. And we will struggle to run the business without him. We have no interest in losing him as part of the business.
You are deflecting the flak, Professor Plum. You hated Shuttleton.
Was there really anybody who, well, my sister aside, of course, my poor sister, who we do need to take time to consider here in this situation, but was there really anybody who actually liked the man? I mean, I can't imagine he wasn't the most liked. But anyway, but this is personal feelings aside. Has anyone actually taken the time to think about my poor sister? How are you dealing with this, Winifred? Obviously it must be very difficult for you at this time.
Yes, it is very difficult. I was due to marry him in a few days, and now I don't know what will happen to, several things.
I've got to point out to you, Winifred, that I understand that actually you needed to marry him to inherit Hope Valley Farm! Ha!
Well, it is true that in my late father's will, if I was not married, then yes, the farm wouldn't go to me and it would go to my brother instead.
Oh, Winifred, did it not occur to you that Simon only wanted you for your money?
Why do you always have to rain on my parade, Miss Scarlett?
Well, perhaps because Simon and I were rather happy until you came along.
Oh, come on. You were only with him for his money.
I'd like to put it to Winifred. She did a deal with Shuttleton to set up a sham marriage. We already know she's got a vested interest.
I don't know what you mean by that. Simon was devoted to me and was always kind to me and noticed me.
Oh, Winifred, you're dull and you are prissy. Do you really think you were the kind of woman for Simon?
Well, clearly, Miss Scarlett, you weren't, otherwise he would have stayed with you. And you would do anything to stop me marrying Simon.
They're not on their own, are they? What about you, Plum? You vowed to stop Shuttleton's marriage to your sister. That's the case, isn't it?
Well, look, I've only got my sister's best interests at heart, like I mentioned, and it's very difficult for her at this time. And I think that my mother raised an interesting point earlier there, that you two, Mustard and Gold, stood to gain quite significantly from this arrangement, what with your business partner, Shuttleton, now no longer in the picture. So what's happening with the Hathersage Spring Water Company now that there's just the two of you?
And what's happening with the Hope Valley Farm? If the marriage didn't go ahead, I wonder who would benefit there, Professor Plum.
Well, I think maybe the Reverend has something to say about this, because we commissioned him to look into some documentation to unearth any dodgy dealings that Shuttleton was almost certainly involved.
Yes, that's right. Phineas asked me to look into whether there was something illegal about the boundary between Hope Valley Farm and Hathersage Hall. But I looked through all the documents. I couldn't see anything of any particular note. One thing that did trouble me, though, Phineas, was that you and your mother reacted very badly when I told you that. And that was on the night of the murder.
Oh, come, Reverend. You're trying to tell me that that man seriously managed to cover his tracks so well that you are incapable of finding the evidence?
Well, there may not have been evidence there, of course, my son. It said on the news about lead piping and poison, Phineas. What's that all about?
Look, my profession requires that I work with certain chemicals which occasionally ignorant people will label with terms like poison, which frankly, I mean, that's just small thinking. They're not poison. Well, everything's a poison if you have too much of it, isn't it? Even charitable works, Reverend. And the lead piping, I simply, on my way to the hall, I noticed there was detritus lying around, and some of that was a pipe, and I picked it up and I took it with me. But and so when the police was talking to me, I just happened to have some pipe with me. But it's nothing illegal about carrying a piece of rubbish that you intend to get rid of later on.
After I told you that there was no evidence of wrongdoing in relation to the boundary, you stormed out of the house, and you're saying you stormed to Hathersage Hall and happened to pick up some lead piping on the way there?
My mother and I, after the meeting with you, both went to the hall. I was clearing rubbish that I'd found on the way, and we had a conversation about your lack of fruitful investigation. That's what happened.
Oh, don't patronise us, Phineas. That is utter garbage.
There's on every farm, there will be things that people would call poison. And we happen to have lead piping on the farm because we're getting rid of some really out-of-date pipe work.
But Patricia, when I told you and Phineas on the night of the murder that there was nothing legally wrong in relation to the boundary between Hope Valley Farm and Hathersage Hall, you were both furious. And if I understand what Phineas is telling us, he then stormed out of the house on his way to see Shuttleton, and he decided to pick up some lead piping on the way.
Well, of course we were furious. We hire you, we pay you to find information out, legal information that you are supposed to be qualified to be able to find out, and you utterly fail. It's clearly, the information's clearly there. Someone as dull as Shuttleton isn't capable of covering their tracks. Apologies, Winifred.
Phineas, he is a vicar, not a private investigator.
He does have legal qualifications, Stella. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. But Phineas and I were purely motivated by our love for Winifred and wanting to...
Come on, Peacock. You despised Shuttleton. I've seen you talking to him several times. You look like you're chewing wasps.
I certainly did despise him. I've despised him since I met him. He wasn't good enough for my lovely daughter.
Okay. So what lengths would you go to stop him marrying her then?
I didn't need to shoot him, if that's what you mean.
Really?
really.
Professor Plum, you vowed to stop the marriage between your sister and Mr. Shuttleton, didn't you?
As my mother has said, we both only have Winifred's best interests at heart. And as we've already covered, Shuttleton was not the most savoury character ever to walk the earth. But that doesn't mean that any of us would go to the lengths of shooting the poor man through the head.
I'm becoming very tired of your prevarication.
What about White? If Shuttleton backed out of the deal, did you kill him to keep him quiet? Huh?
Why would I kill someone who I was about to marry? It doesn't make any sense.
A bit of cash goes a long way, you know what I mean? Especially in Yorkshire.
Perhaps you wanted him dead because he wasn't happy with what you were doing in the firm.
I knew a thing or two about him. He would never have killed me, don't you worry.
What, because you'd rather just steal his money from him after he's been shot in the head, which is why it was covered in blood? Is that how you got that money?
I think you're getting confused now, which is very likely for an academic like yourself, because I didn't have anything to do with this murder.
Could I just ask Dr. Brown something? Weren't you saying in the bunkhouse about something that Shuttleton had done that was illegal?
Well, I know his real name, to be fair, and I know that he's done some dodgy stuff. That's all I'm saying.
Come on, man, out with it. What are you talking about, his real name? How can a man have two names?
I'll not give you any satisfaction there. I just want to move it back to Ms. Flipping White. She backed out of the deal for the marriage. So she killed him to keep him quiet. That's my supposition.
I did not back out of any deal to marry him. The only reason why the marriage didn't go ahead was because he's dead.
Once upon a time there was light in my life. Now it's only love in the dark. Nothing I can say, a total eclipse of the heart. Well, that was heart-wrenching stuff. I've noticed Peacock is now trending. Oh, she is horrible. Why don't you guys take another 5-minute break? And if you're enjoying the show, hit the like button. And if you want more from the players, please subscribe. And why not have a look at our website or our Facebook page? Welcome back. So this is the third of our famous doors of Hathersage. This one's a bit of a tricky one. You need to be in the know. So thanks for all your donations for Gala and all your likes. I've noticed that gold is trending on the live chat. The price of precious metals is certainly on the rise. So it seems that all our suspects are gathering in the drawing room. Let's go and have a listen.
Everybody come into the drawing room. Do make yourselves comfortable. I think we should be rather careful that we're not seen together. After this episode with poor Phineas being arrested and all that nonsense about the poison and the lead piping, the papers have been everywhere. Now, I'd like to have a word with you, Reverend Green. Do you remember that Phineas and I asked you to look into things that Simon Shuttleton was up to? When you'd said there was nothing really that was a problem, I'm not sure what you meant, really. Was there something?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Patricia. There was definitely something about the border between Hathersage Hall and Hope Valley Farm that looked odd. And I've spoken to Phineas because the treehouse he used to play on seems to be over the border in Hathersage Hall now. And so I did look into that in some detail, yes, but I can't quite put my finger on how that's changed.
Yes, I noticed that as well. I used to play in that treehouse, and when I was walking back the other day, I found myself unable to get to it because it was on the other side of a fence. What, didn't you, Winnie, do you remember walking around the garden recently and seeing anything weird?
Well, I noticed that when Simon showed me round the plant recently, I could see that the natural spring is barely inside his property. Otherwise, it would belong to our family. Very odd.
That's rather suspicious. I was a bit concerned that there seemed to be some new fencing or sort of shrubs around there. I'm rather keen to hear from Lady Gabriella Gold. I believe at the time that there was permission given for the Springwater Company. You were leading the planning committee. Is that right?
That's correct. We just followed the boundary from the historical maps.
Reverend Green, did you actually look at the deeds at the historical boundaries?
Yes. Something had changed, but it seemed to have been changed very cleverly. I couldn't evidence the changes through any of the deeds of the past properties. I wonder whether Colonel Mustard might know something about this.
I don't think he does. What do you mean they've been changed very cleverly? How can people change boundaries? That's not a possible thing. I think you're out of your depth here, Reverend Green.
Oh, come, Gabriella. You were involved in planning for many, many years. You know how easy it is to change the boundary on titles if you need to.
With consent and open and honestly. If things can't be done, there are historical precedents. There are maps going back through many, many, many owners of that hall, and we just followed the line when we put the new fences in.
Well, how do you explain the fact that my treehouse is no longer in our garden?
Maybe your treehouse was encroaching on next door's land when it was built, Phineas.
I'm absolutely sure that's not true. I think somewhere up in the attic we have a copy of the map. Perhaps I should go and look for it, Lady Gabriella.
Maybe you should, Patricia.
That's an excellent idea. Anyway, I think it's a good idea that your other business partner has something to say about this. Mustard, what have you got to say?
I have nothing to do with planning applications or whatever. All I can tell you is that the spring is very much part of the Springwater Company.
Well, it better had be, otherwise you're on pretty thin ground, aren't you?
Nobody ever uses the word thin when they're talking about me.
Did Simon Shuttleton find out that actually the spring was on our property? Is that why he was going to marry Winifred? What do you think, Winifred? Do you think he was true?
I think so. I mean, he obviously showed that he liked me, and I could see that the spring was barely inside his property, so it must belong to us.
Winifred, darling, that doesn't make sense. The spring was within his property boundaries, therefore it doesn't belong to you.
Gabriella, on the night of Simon's death, I came out to see you. About 5:30, I'd say. But you weren't home. In fact, neither yours or your husband's car were on the drive. Can you explain where you were on the night of Simon's death?
I just followed Miles. He was out for a walk. I wanted to catch him up. I wanted to spend some time with him and the dog. I'd not seen them all day.
A long walk, was it?
Not very long.
How long, roughly? I mean, I waited about an hour to speak to you.
I can't remember the timing exactly. I mean, I think he walked by the hall up to the mill pond and then back down again. I caught up with him around the hall.
Oh, how come your cars weren't on the drive? You know, if you were walking the dog.
I'm not sure, actually. Maybe I'd left mine at work. I frequently do that at the moment. I cycle backwards and forwards.
If you really were on the committee, what was said about the boundary and the Hope Valley farm?
As I've said, we looked at the boundaries, we looked at the historical maps, we worked out where the spring lay, we put the fence up, and the business propositions went along with that. It was all discussed with you at the time, Patricia, don't you remember?
Nothing was discussed that suggested that Phineas's precious treehouse was on the wrong side, or that the spring might be on our land after all. In fact, if it is, we're owed an awful lot of money.
Okay. Simon was very keen that the spring was within his boundaries.
But you're not sure that that's actually the case.
The historical drawings were a little grey. We just firmed them up.
When you say we, Gabriella, who's we?
Well, I am one of the executive directors of the planning authority, but Simon and I worked on it together. And as I say, the drawings historically were grey and a boundary needs to be decided.
Did you make anything out of this?
What do you mean?
Financially. We know, for instance, that you and your husband are now 50% shareholders in the Spring Water Company.
That was always an understanding between Simon and us.
How much did you pay, you and your husband, for 50% of the Spring Water Company?
It was paid in services rendered.
Services rendered? What do you mean by that? You mean you didn't pay anything for your 50% share in the Spring Water Company?
No, it was through graft and expertise. I have knowledge of the safety, respect around the provision of spring waters. With my work on the Health Commission and with my work on the Planning Board, we ensured that the future of the Spring Water Company was safe.
You're being very quiet, Mustard. Surely you've got something to say here. You can't let your wife take the rap for this.
I would dream of going against my wife. What she says is absolutely true.
She clearly wears the trousers in this relationship, but I would like to know whether this was set up before the company was started, or whether you found out afterwards that actually the spring was on our land.
I don't know, is the honest answer. I left all that to Simon and my wife.
Are you saying that you have no other information whatsoever that you can supply to this conversation?
No, I'm not saying that. I think we're missing something here that could be absolutely crucial. How many of you remember the infamous Castleton robbery case of Was it 13 years ago? And a woman and a small child were run down by an escaping robber.
I remember that. That was horrific.
Yes, it was. And the offender was never caught. Now, I think this is possibly not that important to this inquiry, but it's something I think you should know.
So there's a bit of a history in this quiet little village of ours of violent crime, it seems.
Reverend Green, were you involved in the case when you must have been a solicitor there at that time?
I was a solicitor in Castleton at the time, and so was your daughter, Winifred.
Well, Winifred was in the office, yes. I remember her working with you, of course.
Yes, it was a very distressing time.
Do you remember anything about that, Winifred?
Well, I remember that the newspaper said that there was an outstanding suspect named, what was it? Steve von Schmidt. But we seem to be going off course here. I don't know how that is to tie in with Simon's murder.
Actually, that makes me think, Mustard. I saw Simon Shuttleson's appointment book on his desk, when I was stepping around the pools of blood. And I couldn't help but notice that the very last appointment that he had written down was CMM at 4:30. Colonel Miles Mustard, perhaps? Did you keep that appointment?
Yes, I did, yes. That's right. I did. I called to see him and we had a discussion.
So that means you would have been one of the last people to see him alive. What kind of discussion?
I tried to talk him out of his impending marriage.
Really? Wow. Well, several of us have been trying to do that for years. And what was the result of that?
He got very angry, shouted at me. I persisted for a few minutes and then, I don't know, it'd be about 4:30. I gave up and left. I was quite cross. He seemed very angry. I thought the best thing I could do would be to leave, and I did.
You didn't accidentally shoot him in the head on your way out, did you?
No, I did not.
Come on, tell us what the argument was about, and why did you particularly not want him to marry Winifred?
Well, I didn't want him to get married. Because of you, if you must know. I didn't want you poking around my business, going through my books and records, sticking your nose in where it's not wanted. You're the last person I would want involved with the Spring Water Company, and I was hoping to talk him out of the marriage, which would have kept you at bay.
I'll ask you to keep a civil tongue in your mouth when you're talking to my mother, Colonel.
Why do you not want me to know about things? Is that because you're aware that the spring is on my land?
That's one of the issues, but...
I'll sue you for every penny you've got if you don't tell us what's going on here.
Every time you open your mouth, you accuse us of something illegal, rotten, immoral, and I don't want you around my company. Can I say that any clearer?
I think there's a very shady deal going on here.
Now I know what Simon means when he says he's surrounded by imbeciles. He told me, Colonel Mustard, that you and both Dr. Brown were forced to work in the business with him. Why was he forced to have you in the business?
He wasn't forced. My wife asked me to go and put a proposition to him that we should be made 50% partners, which he agreed to.
So, Gabriella, did you force Simon to take them on?
Not at all. It was all in Simon's interests. He needed a business mind behind his business. He had the wherewithal and the spring water knowledge, and I was purely the boundaries and the guidance and the marketing and the public face of the spring
So why
water.
would he refer to everybody as imbeciles?
I think he might be referring to Dr. Brown, possibly to my husband. He can put that face on from time to time.
How very dare you! That's outrageous.
I think we ought to talk to Stella Scarlett a little more. Why were you yelling and so angry when Shuttleton dumped you?
Why do you think I was angry? Simon and I were perfectly happy before Winifred White came along, sticking her oar in, waving money in his face. He was obviously having something that he wanted.
You were furious.
Stella, do you remember that night when the girls came out to the pub and we had that lock-in?
I remember it well.
Do you? I'm surprised. You joined us after hours when the doors and the shutters were down and had a few gins. I think we finished several bottles between us.
Well, it does sound like something I would do.
Do you remember talking about Simon's estate and how you thought that you might be able to benefit from it in some way?
Why shouldn't I benefit from it? We were a couple. What's his was mine.
No more than that? No less than that?
What are you getting at, Gabriella?
I think you should come clean, Miss Scarlett, and tell us what your true feelings were for Mr. Shuttleton.
I loved Simon Shuttleton, and I think that's my business, and nothing to do with either of you two.
Isn't it about time you told everyone about Mexico?
Well, what I know about Mexico is that I had a wonderful holiday with Simon, in which we got married.
Married?
Married?
Married? Oh, he forgot to tell you, Winifred. Oh, he must have let that one slip.
But Stella,
Pipe down, you. Hi. So, I've noticed that Brown has been trending on the live chat. Brown, bonkers, Brown. Bonkers, 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 Brown. Who do you think did it? White? Nah, you got no idea. Why don't you take another short break whilst we discuss, and remember to smash that like button. See ya. Oh, it's gone a bit all Alice in Wonderland. Welcome back. So that was the fourth of our famous doors of Hathersage. Auntie, it's a good one. I see that White is now trending on the live chat. No. Innocent White? She's not involved, surely. I see that all the suspects are now gathering in the dining room. Let's go and have a listen.
Well now, that was a delicious meal, thank you to John and Emma. It's a bit like eating in Hogwarts in here, isn't it? I'm concerned that one of us is guilty, and we're all sitting around sharing this Last Supper. Somebody needs to start talking. Brian, you need to leave the wine alone, and you need to answer some questions. You were always the weakest link in the Springwater Company. Do you remember that time when you stopped the filters, or you didn't stop the filters and everything got muddy and the bottles went out? Why didn't Simon sack you? What hold did you have over him, Brian?
Well, that was an unfortunate event, dear. May I call you dear? But that was all to do with the fact that he owed me one. He owed me one because, may I be frank, I'd helped him out of a corner, a situation. And he'd probably told you about it, but I know him better than you know him. You might not know this, but he's not Shuttleton. His name is Steve Von Schmidt.
Really?
What? I really don't understand.
Just if I may, Dr. Brown, the plant closes at 3:30, and I understand you phoned the police at about 6:45. So why were you in the study at Hathersage Hall hours after the plant had closed with Shuttleton's dead body?
Well,
Isn't it about time you came clean about where you got the money for those pearl earrings?
all right, I'll come clean because I know I didn't kill him, so I can give you the information, but as long as I have your absolute attestation that I don't know if that's a word, but that you will not like dob me in, because I know you're a bit dodgy, Gilbert. Right, so I discovered Shuttleton's body. All right, I admit it. I called the police, and whilst I waited, impulsively, I emptied his wallet, didn't I? Well, you would, wouldn't you? 500 quid. Does that answer your question?
Just a moment. Hello, Colonel Mustard. Oh, the police. Yes, we were expecting it. You want to tell me what? Oh. I see. Right. Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'll tell the others.
What did they say?
They said that the result of the post-mortem has just come in, and Shuttleton was dead when he was shot.
No.
What?
And that he died after being hit by a blunt instrument above the left ear. They didn't say what.
Phineas! That lead piping!
The police have already examined that.
It had nothing to do with me. I certainly didn't hit anyone with any lead piping. Don't be throwing accusations around about that.
And I must say, There was nothing. There was no lead piping that was left here.
Exactly. So it couldn't possibly have been lead piping. Blunt instrument, there's nothing to do with me.
The police didn't say what it was. Just that he was dead when he was shot.
This doesn't make sense. Who shoots a dead man?
Somebody who thought that he was still alive. Somebody who knew that the revolver was loaded.
So actually, there are two murderers.
Well, it rather narrows it down to Colonel Mustard or Dr. Brown.
Ha! I hate to stick up for the man, but it couldn't possibly have been Mustard with a gun. I mean, we all know that Shuttleton had zero respect for Mustard anyway, all that bluff and bluster. I mean, can you imagine Mustard pointing a gun at Shuttleton? He'd probably just laugh at him. He'd have just sat there laughing at him, even if he'd shot him. You didn't shoot him, did you?
Thank you for that vote of confidence. No, I didn't.
Actually, when you were talking to the police, Colonel Mustard, it sounded as though you were expecting them to actually convict you of murder. Why did you sound like that?
Convict me? Why me?
You said I was expecting you to call.
Well, I think we've all been expecting the police to call, haven't we?
No.
The amount of information we've been swapping about willy-nilly. Nothing to do with me.
Patricia, I still wonder whether you might have had something to do with this lead piping and poison, because I don't think Phineas has quite got it in him, nice as he is.
As I've said to you before, there's always bits of lead piping and poison around a farm. It's not unusual. Ask any farmer.
Convenient. Do you remember the time we strolled through the farm when we were discussing boundaries, and when you had no problems with the boundaries, and you were saying you were sturdy and stoic enough to do any man's job on the farm? Animal husbandry. You could handle a bull.
Did you want to say something else?
I just wondered whether you'd be capable of killing a man.
I'm sure I'd be capable. I suspect anybody in this room is capable. But you, my dear, had a very big motive to kill him. I suspect he knew that you'd fiddled the boundary and all of that, and he was suddenly getting cold feet, and you wanted to get rid of him.
Why would he have cold feet? Everything was hunky-dory with the business.
Look at you acting all innocent. Keeping these secrets from everybody. What else have you two been keeping secret?
Talking of secrets, Scarlet, I once heard you boast that you could get that imbecile Brown to do anything you wanted. You have him wrapped around your little finger. Maybe you were planning to use him to get to Shuttleton.
Don't be so ridiculous, Phineas. You know what Brian's like. Brian's in love with me. Why shouldn't I be flattered?
For heaven's sake, woman. I've gone off you now. And I think I quite fancy Phineas. Compared with you.
Don't we all, Brian?
Anyway, I've got one more thing to say. Winifred, Winnie, are you listening?
Yes.
Yes, right. Years ago, you told me of being in love with some lawyer who worked in your law firm. Do you can you remind me who he was?
Well, I don't see what that has got to do with anything, but
I'd like to ask you, my dear, who was he? And are you still in love with him? And is he still in love with you? Ah!
well, I wouldn't know his feelings on the matter. But yes, I was in love with a lawyer where I worked at the solicitor's firm. I was devoted to him, but he never noticed me. So I returned to Hathersage.
So are you saying that you were in love with someone and yet you still married Shuttleton?
Marrying Shuttleton was a quick fix to all my problems. being unmarried and then not being able to inherit the farm. And so I agreed to marry Simon, partly because I was broken-hearted for having longed for someone for many years and then not even paying any attention. No, Dr. Brown, it wasn't you. It was...
Auntie, you're poisoning them against me. I must say it tastes pretty good though. I've noticed that mustard is now trending on the live chat. I have to say though, I don't think he's quite cutting it. So, I hope that you've all enjoyed this year's gala, and a big thank you must go to the committee and their helpers for making this work remotely. We're now about to move out of the Zoomosphere and into the garden for the final chapter of our murder mystery. Why don't you have another short break, but please don't forget to donate to the gala and smash that like button. And one final thing, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Orange is the new orange. Now down to the serious business. Thank you, Auntie. That's our stagehand Auntie supplying me with copies of all your live chat. I call her Auntie because she looks after me so well. Now where was I? Oh yes. Now, down to the serious business. The purpose of bringing you 8 suspects here to the Hathersage Hall Business Centre is to unmask a murderer. One of you, 7 days ago, murdered Simon Shuttleton. You should know right now that there is no hiding place. Let's get started. Please, would you all stand up? This is round 1. We are live on the Hathersage Players YouTube channel. Please do not swear. In round 1, we, that's the audience and me, will clear 3 suspects, and once cleared, they will be free to go. Gold. It's quite clear that you have been involved in something very illegal about the boundary of Hathersage Hall and Hope Valley Farm. That might have given you a motive to shut up Shuttleton. You're going nowhere. White. You claim that you were out of Hathersage at the time of the killing. That may be so, but it wouldn't stop you being part of a conspiracy with Green to kill Shuttleton. You and Green do seem pretty close. If Shuttleton was about to pull out of the deal to help you get Hope Valley Farm, perhaps you had to shut him up. Not such an innocent face after all. Online, Apple Pie says there's no evidence against you. And I think they're right. You're free to go. One down, 6 to go. Green. If you're not part of this conspiracy with White, it's difficult to see how you would have got tied up in this murder. You don't have an alibi, but you don't seem to have a motive either. As to these boundary documents, unless you are hiding something, it doesn't look like you have anything to gain there either. You're also free to go. Brown. You are bonkers. Online, Sharpshooter says they fancy you. I think they must be more mad than you are. Maybe you've just been sniffing the same chemicals for too long. Anyway, you're going nowhere. Peacock. You hothead. I can see where Plum gets it from. You would never have let Shuttleton get his hands on your farm by marriage to White because you think he's trash. It's nothing to do with your love for White. When Green told you and Plum that he couldn't do anything about the boundary dispute, you and Plum left in a fury. You got there, found the body and left. Shuttleton was dead before you got there. I don't like you, but you're free to go. And that ends round 1. 3 down, 4 to go. But 1 murderer remains.
Well, I think it's absolutely absurd that I was ever considered in all of this. Why? Why would I kill someone who was going to marry me? Someone who liked me and who would have brought me more wealth and property? I think it was Stella
Scarlet who did it. Always raining on my parade. Always wanting to put me down. Oh, she definitely did it. She's nothing without Simon's wealth. And how could I have done it anyway? I was out of town at the time of the murder. At a dress fitting.
Well, I have to say that's a relief. It's not good for Vicar of Hathersage to be implicated in a murder. I mean, I've had the bishop on the phone and everything, but glad to be out early. Nothing to do with me.
Well, I'm relieved that dear Winifred has been released from all that. She's a fragile flower. I know she'll be devastated for some time, but she can never marry Shuttleton now. She's escaped the worst mistake of her life. Poor Phineas is still under suspicion, but I'm sure he won't be for long. I wish I had killed Shuttleton. He got what he deserves.
Oh, thank you, Auntie. May I have a cup of tea as well? Auntie's keen that we tidy up before we leave. You join us live at Hathersage Hall Business Centre for round 2 of the hunt for Shuttleton's killer. Would you please all stand up? This is round 2. We are live on the Hathersage Players YouTube channel. Please do not swear. In round 2, the audience and me will clear more suspects, and once cleared, they will be free to go. But in this round, we're only going to clear 2 suspects, leaving 3 for the final round. Scarlet. Any chance you could get that beer cheaper in the bunkhouse? Oh, sorry, I forget myself. Scarlet, you couldn't believe that Shuttleton would dump you for someone as plain as white. What's more, you were promised much by Shuttleton, especially after that so-called marriage in Mexico. Motive indeed. You will be in the final round. Plum. My mum fancies you. God only knows why. You had a whole farm to gain and have inherited your mother's temper. You stormed off to Hathersage Hall, stopping only to pick up some lead piping, which was later found to have Shuttleton's blood on it. You will also be in the final round. Brown, bonkers brown. It turns out you were closer to Shuttleton than we had all thought. You were in his gang of bank robbers 13 years ago when you all held up the bank in Castleton. That's why you know he was called Steve Bon Schmidt. And that's why you got the job at Hathersage Hall Spring Water Company. The combination of a lack of reward from Shuttleton for helping him and the way he treated Scarlet would have been plenty of motive for you to kill him. You went round that night to have it out with him, but he was already dead. You then rifled his wallet and called the police. You idiot. You should be ashamed. But you're not the killer. You are free to go. Mustard and gold. What a pair. She hates him. He just wants a trophy wife. Unfortunately for you, Mustard, Gold doesn't get her hands dirty. She always gets someone else to do her dirty work for her. In this instance, it's you. She wasn't prepared to get dragged through the mud for changing of the boundary and thereby giving Shuttleton access to the natural spring. Lady by name, but not by nature. Not only did she fire you up to kill Shuttleton, but she was already planning to run off with Plum, with the proceeds from the sale of the Hathersage Hall Spring Water Company. Sadly though, Mustard, you are staying for the final round as she goes free. Gold, you're free to go. And that ends round 2. 5 down and 2 to go. But one murderer still remains.
Oh, I'm so relieved from getting out of that. I can't believe it. I was going to kill him, I tell you. Scarlett, she's my woman. And he took her from me. I can't believe it. But I didn't. And I'm out of it. I'm out of it. Talk about chaos theory. I'm out of it.
Of course I'm innocent. How ridiculous. Fine, upstanding member of the community. Though I do worry about Miles. Why is he still there?
Oh, thank you, Auntie. And yes, you can come and tuck me in later. I'm told online that Dark Parrot is asking where I get my makeup. Actually, it's my own brand. I'll be messaging about it later. Now onwards. You join us live at the Hathersage Hall Business Centre for the final round of the hunt for Shuttleton's killer. Please would you all stand up. This is the final round. We are live on the Hathersage Players YouTube channel. Please do not swear. In the final round, 2 will go free and 1 will never go free again. It's as simple as that. Scarlett, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. You could not deal with losing Shuttleton to White. Plain, boring White. Your alternative was life with Bonkers Brown. Not really an option, was it? If you couldn't have Shuttleton, then White wasn't going to have him either. And you would take your chance of wealth off the back of that so-called marriage in Mexico. Turns out, you had access to strychnine through your work at the bunkhouse and could easily have popped out whilst on a break and put the poison in his cup, in his study. Hey, lo and behold, the police find strychnine in his coffee cup. You had better wait there. Mustard. Online, the Night Watchman noticed that the joy you found out that Shuttleton was dead before he was shot, you found hard to contain. That could only mean one thing. You shot him. That's right. Having lost your temper with him, you stormed off, only to return in just as foul a mood. When you came into the study, unbeknownst to you, Shuttleton was already dead. You didn't know that, and you grabbed his pistol, which you knew was kept loaded, and shot him from behind. All that to keep your wife happy and to stop the Peacock clan dragging your names through the dirt. You should not be going free, but you are. You are free to go.
Surprised? I bet you are. I've seen the comments that you put. You had me down for this right from the start. Well, now you know that Colonel Mustard of the British Army is not a murderer. Such a bumbling old fool couldn't possibly commit such a heinous crime. Or could he?
I remind you both, We are live on the Hathersage Players YouTube channel. Please do not swear. One of you is a murderer. Plum, plum, plum. The man who stood to inherit all of Hope Valley Farm as long as White did not marry. Well, they say the path of love never runs smooth, and with you around, it's surprising that it runs at all. With your hot-headed temper, you are never going to let White take Hope Valley Farm away from you. Indeed, you even had a plan to combine Hathersage Hall's Spring Water Company with Hope Valley Farm and run off with gold. Online, the Badger could never understand why you would stop at your old treehouse to pick up some lead piping when you were furious and on your way to see Shuttleton. There can only be one reason: to use it as a weapon. The only real question is whether you got there before Scarlet's poison killed him and before Mustard had put a bullet in the back of his head. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, to reveal the murderer. Is it Scarlet and her poison? Or is it Plum and his lead piping? The results of the post-mortem report. It's very brief. It confirms, as we know, that Shuttleton was dead before Mustard shot him. And it confirms that there was only one cause of death. Scarlet, fortunately for you, it appears that Shuttleton never took the poison you had put in his coffee cup. Which means the cause of death was a blow struck to the side of Shuttleton's head by you, Plum. Plum, you are the murderer. And Scarlet, you are free to go.
Well, that was a surprise. Not that it was Plum. That man's got murderer written all over him. And stupid for that matter. No wonder he got caught. No, it's a surprise I did what I did and walked away. Still, they both got what's coming to them in the end.
Plum, the viewers wait to see if you have a scrap of decency in you. Will you admit what you have done?
This is ridiculous. I didn't kill the man. He was dead when I got there. Whether he was shot by a revolver or poisoned by that witch, it doesn't make any difference. What does make a difference is that I know something that none of you know. My mother and I hired Reverend Green to investigate the boundary dispute between Hope Valley Farm and Hathersage Hall. In the course of that investigation, Green went through Shuttleton's entire history. In fact, I think it's fair to say that Reverend Green knows more about Simon Shuttleton, or should I say, Stephen von Schmidt, than just about anybody else here. Don't you think it's a bit of a coincidence that the murder happened on the very same day that the bank was robbed in Castleton 13 years ago? The Reverend would have us believe that he's a single man, no family. A little birdie tells me that that's not quite the whole truth. I don't know what the Reverend is hiding, but I'd be willing to bet my mother's farm that it has something to do with this murder. And I suggest you go and find the Reverend before he gets away and ask him yourself. And I just happen to know exactly where he's hiding.
There he is. Come on. Green. Green.
They died here, you know.
Who?
My wife and my son. 13 years ago. run down by von Schmidt. It broke me. So I trained to be a priest. Someone who could preach forgiveness.
Are you getting this?
Only it made my life a lie. I could never forgive. I realised it was Shuttleton when I looked through those boundary papers. On the anniversary, I went to confront him with the truth. Saw Plum storming out. Do you know what he said to me when I told him I knew? He told me that he didn't have the guts to do anything about it, and he laughed. Laughed at me. Laughed at them. God forgive me, I snapped. I hit him. I hit him so hard with some wrench or something. Just for one brief minute, I didn't feel the anger anymore.
You know Plum has been charged with this murder.
Oh my God! What have I done?